meeting of the 24th of March. Well, I'm happy to move that motion. Do we have a second?
I can second that, Mr. Chairman. Lloyd.
Seconded by Lloyd. Any further discussion? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
So carried. And how do we make that bigger? We'll move to item 7, which is notification of extraordinary or urgent business. I'm not aware of any this morning. Questions. I haven't been made aware of any questions this morning. So we'll move to item 9, which is the chairman's and councillors' reports. Since we're electronic, we probably haven't got too many reports this morning. I'll accept verbal ones shortly. The list of meetings I've attended was attached to the minutes. If there's any questions of anything I've attended, happy to answer questions now. If there is not, I will ask if there's anybody wants to give a verbal report at this stage. And I'm not able to see anybody wanting to do that at the moment. If I'm missing anybody, don't appear to be. Right, we will move to, actually, I guess at this stage we better note those reports. Would somebody like to move in that direction?
I'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Lloyd, seconded by
I'll second.
By Alan. All in favour will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against, no, carried. Right, we will now move to item 10, or item 1 rather, which is the Chief Executive's report, which is coming up on the screen now. Rob, I'll ask you to speak to your report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as written, but I wonder whether we could ask Angus, I know he's got a fair bit going on today, if we could, he's going to speak to one part of that report, and I thought it'd be good for him to give us a briefing on how where things are sitting with him. And so can I, with your permission, hand over to Angus to give us a heads up.
Thanks for that, Rob. Angus, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I just thought I'd give you a bit of an update where things stand with us, what the future might look like, and happy to answer any questions. So I think the first thing to note is this is an all of government response. It's very different to the flood that we had, where that was very much a regional state of emergency, and we sorted things out down here. So it's very much led by health, and a lot of the powers that are being used are under the Health Act. The Prime Minister also signed an epidemic notice, so that gives her some leeway to change legislation and direct things from a government point of view. And we've also got a national state of emergency, which will keep getting renewed every 7 days for as long as they feel the need. But very much we're the supporting act to the health provisions. And with a national state of emergency, I take my direction from the National Controller. So that's Sarah Stewart-Black, who's been on TV at lunchtimes most days. So the direction from the National Controller is for me to coordinate the response in Southland in support of health. So we do take a lot of lead from health, and we have to be careful that we follow their key messages and their direction in where we go with a lot of things. So it does limit the freedom of action that we had, for example, in the floods. So the other direction we've had is that our coordination centre at the back of Environment Southland is open 7 days a week, and that we opened up an 0800 helpline for welfare requests. So the coordination centre, again, it's very different to the floods where we had probably 70 people in there every day. We're running on a real skeleton staff. We're trying to make the most use of remote working. And we've split our staff up into 2 shifts. So we work 4 days on, 4 days off. And those 2 shifts are completely isolated from each other. So if we do have somebody does get COVID, we can isolate that bubble, and we've still got some people who can come in and do the job. So health and safety and social distancing and all that new way of living are all part of how we're having to work in the coordination centre. What I'm trying to do is, although we are following the lead from health, every day we put out our situation report. I give an update to the mayors, CEs, some of the local MPs around some of the issues we might be facing locally. And we also put out a stakeholder update at the end of the day. So hopefully you're getting at least one of those pieces of information every day. We've also got the Facebook page and the website where we're trying to keep updated. The 0800 number, we had to set that up pretty quickly. It was a direction to get it done sort of like by 7 o'clock the next morning. So far, we've not had great demand. We've probably been getting about 20 calls a day. And some of them are quite easy. We just provide information or point the person in the right place. But some of them are becoming slightly more complicated. So people have, you know, challenging domestic circumstances at the best of times. And then if we throw in the lockdown or actually people with COVID-19, there's some real complex welfare cases that we're dealing through at the moment. Yesterday, we had a real spike in the number of calls, and we realised that MSD, Ministry for Social Development, have started ringing around everybody over 70. So in the southern MSD region, which is from just below Christchurch down, I think there's something like 8,500 over 70s that they're ringing, and if they can't get through or they're having difficulty making that contact, they just started referring all those calls through to our 0800 number. So yesterday afternoon we got swamped really with something that we didn't really need, and we've escalated that up to try and get that situation resolved. As well as us doing our work, we, you know, in the floods, we had such a great community response. We had all those community hubs opened up and halls, and you know, local people were looking after local people. We're still seeing that again in this response, but we're not seeing people in the physical locations. So, for example, you saw probably in the news the other day, Ojai Nightcaps. Their local community have got those red and green stickers in the window, and if you need help, you get the red one and someone will give you a ring. The same in Te Anau, we've got the local community board there leading the way there, using the local food bank and providing food and household goods for people. And Civil Defence's role is to make sure that those food banks have got enough food, and the direction from Central is that we will pay for all that and we will cost recover from government. So at the moment, they've opened up that 100% cost recovery for welfare needs, and that includes pretty much anybody who's affected by this lockdown, which is really great. Great South have done an awesome job. They're all working remotely. They helped us at the start dealing with all the freedom campers and tourists, and we managed to resolve a lot of those issues really early on. They've also been ringing around all the businesses and trying to get a feel for what the feeling is in the community, the business community, and where people are moving forward. And I think that's been really challenging for Great South to make those phone calls at the moment. So we're kind of in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment. We're kind of waiting for people to ring, and we're ready to provide assistance. We've got systems in place all around that. We've just reappointed Ken Swinney as the group recovery manager. So Ken was just on the wind down from the floods, and now he's back in looking at how we can recover from that COVID-19 position. So some of the kind of urgent things, government wants to know what large infrastructure projects councils could be moving into to try and get the recovery going. And also Ken's looking at what the consequences for Southland are. So looking at a matrix of what are the issues and how do we tackle them as we move forward. We're kind of halfway through this level 4 lockdown. It's a decision for government whether we need to stay in it or not for longer, or if we move out of it, when we might move back into it if we need to. So, you know, we're all hoping that 4 weeks will be enough, but it may not be. And the way these epidemics progress, it might be that in a month's time we have another spike, and it might be a need for some more lockdown restrictions. But you know, that, as I say, that will be directed by central government. And I guess also, even if we might move out of level 4 to level 3, the border restrictions will still stay in place for a long time to come. So even if we might resume some normality domestically, we might still not be having any international travel. So we're certainly planning for keeping our operation going for, I'd say, at least 6 months. And that's, you know, this is completely different to that sudden urgent emergency that we respond to for a couple of weeks and then go back to our day jobs. This has just changed everything for us. So on that note, I think that's pretty much everything I've got, but I'm more than happy to take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thanks for that, Angus, and it's great to get an update. You spoke to the Mirror Forum last week, and I thought that was very useful. So really good you could come on and share that with council, but actually also to a wider audience. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and I guess my one question is, at that length of time, are you worried about keeping enough staff to man the operation?
So I think we're all in a new and kind of exciting place working remotely, as we can see from this council meeting, and getting the right the right staff and the right numbers of staff who can come in and work with us. You know, we're finding a lot of people are happy to work remotely, but may have you know, vulnerable relatives that are in their bubble, so they can't come in and work with us in the operations centre. So it's a real it's been a bit of a challenge, but at the moment we're working with that much reduced staff. We've got a good skeleton team in there, and we're making progress that we can keep this going for a while. But I guess, you know, as councils develop their thinking around how they use their staff remotely working, we'll always be reviewing what our needs are.
Thanks for that, Angus. Any other questions for Angus?
Lloyd here, Angus. The first fortnight has been a little bit of fun and new and exciting, but I'm really concerned about the tail end of this, and people get, I said, depressed or feel locked in, anxiety takes over. Are we giving some consideration to that?
Look, absolutely. You know, one of the key phone contacts, if people do need any support, is that 1737, either phone or text that number, and they'll provide some counselling support. There's certainly a whole psychosocial work stream that Health are running. They're putting out some planning around you know, messages for organisations with their staff as these weeks proceed, because you're quite right, we're in this kind of honeymoon period at the moment, probably changing, and then people start getting a lot more anxious about the longer term future. With the travel restrictions, we've got Easter weekend coming up, and police got some clarification around their powers. So the Director of Health signed off on Section 70 of the Health Act, and he's clarified around their powers to stop people, check what they're doing, and to, you know, if the warnings and their education advice don't meet up, they can actually arrest people who are breaking the lockdown. So on the run up to Easter, you will see a much higher level of police patrol, and that's to provide some reassurance, and also to make sure that people aren't thinking of going to the crib or the batch over the Easter weekend, and just to make sure we keep in this lockdown phase.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Peter here. Angus, I think just to follow up to Lloyd's question, is that the challenge, I believe, will be when good news starts to come through about New Zealand's cases and people lose that discipline. I think that's probably going to be the challenge in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think we're not over this by a long way. You know, as I said, we've got some real complicated welfare cases at the moment, and they just highlight to me the real need for us to keep on with this lockdown, because, you know, we've got a few at the moment, and I'd hate to think if we ended up with dozens or lots of cases, because it's hard enough just dealing with one or two. But I just should say as well, the 0800 number is 0800 890 127. And if anybody does have any welfare needs, they need some shopping, they need pointed in the right direction, please give us a ring and we'll do our best to help you out.
Any further questions for Angus?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So shall I move into my report?
Eric here. I didn't realise I was muted. Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, you go, Eric.
Yeah, right. Look, welfare of particularly farmers. The works are processing 50% less of lamb, 30% of beef, and we just need an outbreak to occur in one of the two works in Southland, and we're going to have significant issues of just management of people who are under stress on farm. And there was an article in the Southland Times this week about the pressures coming on in winter. How is that being managed? Have you got your fingers on that, or there is a few opportunities out there that we need to start moving on?
So through you, Mr. Chair, you're quite right, that rural community and the concerns are very real and very significant, and Councillor McCullum raised it at the mayoral forum the other day. So, you know, a lot of the issues we're having, I escalate up through the chain and they go to the National Crisis Management Centre in Wellington. And I've got to say, I'm very impressed that we do tend to get an answer. So MPI put out some advice. MPI are really aware of all the issues we've got coming up, such as, for want of a better word, Gypsy Day, the winter grazing, winter feed requirements, and they're leading that part of the work. From my point of view, I've got to make sure that I can identify what's happening in Southland and make sure that that is escalated up to the powers that be, that they take it seriously. So the Rural Support Trust are part of our welfare team. They've got a rural network going, and from an ES point of view, I think Fiona Young is part of that. And we're saying to Fiona, if she can work with them and come up with clear issues for the next 6 months for that rural community, and we'll make sure that they're escalated and being worked on at a national level.
And Chair, just follow on from that, we're also having some discussions with MPI and Beef and Lamb, just from an ES perspective, and as Angus says, Fiona's involved in that, as is Jonathan. But we are looking ahead to what this might mean, and how do we make sure that you know, we avoid that situation. So those conversations are going on with the right organisations. And
Mr. Chairman, Peter here, just to Angus, could I ask, so when we come out of the lockdown, in regards to the processes, will they be able to go to full capacity and do away with the distancing in the plants if we go down to level 2 or level 1?
The simple answer is I don't know. I think as the levels go down, the restrictions will come off accordingly. But I think if we go to level 3, we've still got the social distancing that we're supposed to be doing. Yeah. I think it's a little bit more complicated. It's not just the level 3 or level 4 lockdown that's causing the issues. It's the international market. It's all sorts of complications. So, you know, we're all going through this for the first time, and I think there's a lot of people in Wellington working on how we do move out of level 4 and what does that mean and what's the new normal for us. But at the moment, I don't know what that is.
Mr. Chairman, you've got Lloyd Esler and Lyndall Ludlow would like to speak.
Okay, we'll take Lloyd Esler first. You're on, Lloyd.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, sorry, I had a few questions before and I was waving, but nobody noticed. and I'm using the phone because I haven't got audio on the computer. I was going to ask Angus, is there a role for somebody who wants to help to sort of phone up and say, well, look, I can do something. Can you match me with somebody? Or are you just relying on your existing contacts?
Yep, thank you. We are getting lots of offers of help. But at the moment, as I say, we're probably not getting many calls through. So some of the existing community groups, I think, are doing an excellent job and just triaging everything before it comes through to us. But certainly, if people want to offer some help, email us through. Probably covid19@cdsouthland.nz is probably the best email. And we've got a board in our coordination centre with all those groups and people who've offered help. And certainly, as we expect as the weeks go on, we get more welfare needs. We'll certainly be looking for people to help out. But obviously, we've got to make sure that those community groups are socially distancing and keeping themselves safe. So we just have to. There's a little bit of control and coordination got to go on. We can't just have people helping out in ways that aren't safe. Yeah.
Lyndall. Are you there, Lyndall?
Yes, can you hear?
Yes, you're on. Okay, there you are.
Thank you. I think we double unmuted and ended up muted again. Just wondering what the tourist situation is like. I know early on I was seeing a lot of camper vans cruising about. How's that looking from your end?
So from a Southland point of view, we're pretty good. As I say, Great South did a lot of work early on, and we managed to get freedom campers into campgrounds and keep them located there. And a lot of our tourists went back to Queenstown to try and return home. So at the moment, we're a lot better off than most places around New Zealand. And I think we've got a couple of issues with foreign nationals who now want to get home and get on the repatriation flights. And we're just working through how we get them from places in Southland back up to Christchurch or Auckland to do that. It is an exception in the essential travel. So people who are trying to repatriate and have gone through their consulates and who have got a ticket on a plane can travel back to one of the major centres to do that. But as I say, most of the tourists have moved on to other areas, which is a great solution for us.
Any further questions before we go back to Rob's report?
Nickel, you've got one from David Stevens.
David, I see David. Go, David.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. You may not be able to answer it, Angus, but has there been any discussion as to provinces coming out of lockdown gradually, some more so than others? Obviously, just aware of the Southern District being quite high in numbers at all.
So I think, again, that's a topic that they are working through planning. Does the Southland DHB region stay in lockdown longer than others because we've got more numbers? I haven't got any information on that, but I would think that's certainly something that they are looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one last question. I see the Australians are very firm on returning people. They are put straight into isolation, quarantine for a fortnight, even if they live in the same city. Is there any talk of doing that here? That does look to be one of the weaknesses at the moment of people arriving, and do we have enough control over making sure they are self-isolating?
As I understand it, people who are returning from overseas are put straight into a hotel at the airport for 14 days. So you can't just go home and say you're going to self-isolate. And also the police are doing checkups within the first 3 days of people returning home who are self-isolating, just to make sure that they're following the rules. So I think, there's not that many flights coming back at the moment, and they certainly are ramping up the enforcement of keeping those isolated. Because when you look at the numbers, it's the people who've been overseas who are coming back who are the ones who are the much higher risk.
Thanks very much for that, Angus. If there's no further questions for Angus, we'll go back to Rob to his report. Thanks very much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Angus, thanks.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Well, if my report paints a picture, I guess, of the work going on in the place, you can see just, that in areas like consents and planning, it continues. There's a significant workload in consents and some reasonably big ones, applications coming through, and the planning work continues. And a number of the other areas of the business are also able to operate remotely. Corporate, you would have seen the IT stats there, I think, in terms of testing our capacity with a number of people online and using our systems. We're pleased how that's working. And we also, picking up some of the points Angus raised, we are working hard at our roster. So just to make sure we can both support EMS, but also make sure that our critical parts of our business continue. So we're doing, as I've touched on before, our incident management team is now looking at managing that interface around the virus and the organisation, and starting to do the planning for what happens post lockdown and what that looks like. We're not sure as to if we'll be in a different stage to the rest of the country. We'll have to see how that pans out, and those are Wellington decisions. But we need to do the planning just to see how that's going to all work. Not sure there's anything else. Are there any questions around the report?
Any questions for Rob?
Yeah, I've got a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Peter, you're on.
Thank you. Rob, I see under consents, just at the bottom, you've got further comments, and you talked about, it's written Ngāi Tahu Seafood Resources, an application for 2,500 hectares. So that's just over 6,000 acres. And you've referred it as of coastal space. So is that deemed, like you say, coastal space or offshore?
It's a coastal space.
Okay. Is there any other applications pending for any other space?
Look, there's a lot of interest in aquaculture, as you know. So yeah, we'll keep you updated as we get as they come through the door.
Thank you.
Any further questions on Rob's report?
If there's none, Mr. Chairman, I'll move the report.
Thank you, Lloyd. Moved by Lloyd. A seconder. I can see Bonnie. Thank you, Bonnie. Seconded by Bonnie. If there's no further comment, I will put that motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Against no. So I see a lot of hands, so that's all good. Right, we will move on to item 2, which is the Southland Flood Control and Drainage Management Bylaw 2020, which is on page 51 of the staff report. And I'll invite staff to comment on it.
I think Gavin Gill is going to lead this, Chair. Is that right, Gavin? Are you going to take us through this? And maybe with Paddy's assistance, I'm not sure. Who's the key staff member?
My understanding, Gavin is.
Okay, welcome. Are you there, Gavin?
Right, okay,
Hi.
I've mute
Oh,
off.
yes.
Sorry. It's, it was being temperamental on me. Yeah, good morning, councillors. Right, so yeah, so we've got the recommended decision from the Strategy and Policy Committee, which is being put to council for the decision to be adopted. Now, I understand Councillor McCallum had some concerns about one of the recommendations particularly the control of gravel on floodplains. Would you like to comment on that, Councillor McCallum?
Yes, thank you. In the it refers to 5F, and there's a practice note down below which says including baled straw, hay / shipping containers. I'm happy with that, but the gravel one becomes quite complex. Are we talking about gravel holes, gravel beaches, gravel piles? Gravel's not really the issue that we've been dealing with. It's actually been things that can actually move and do damage further down the stream. Most gravel is stockpiled on high ground and even if it had a foot of water around it, it's not going to make a lot of difference, but a bale of balers would chip. So for clarity and simplicity, I'm wondering whether we should actually move and gravel from that appendix note, and that doesn't change anything, but I think it would be very difficult for us to actually implement that. So I've suggested to Gavin that doesn't really add value, and maybe we should actually remove those two words.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McCallum. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So we're looking at the bottom of page 58 on the agenda. So you'll see at the bottom of the page is 2 footnotes referring to items which the storage of is controlled on the floodplains, and you'll see footnote 1. We're looking at things like baleage, and we've included gravel at this stage. So.
I also note here that, just as Councillor McCallum notes, removing the gravel from the footnote would not necessarily remove the requirement not to store gravel in the floodplain there. Those are just listed as examples of items that have caused problems historically.
Now I'm seeing a number of people. Bonnie, Ellen and Neville, were you indicating you wanted to speak? Or you weren't? No, that's okay. I know there was a couple of things that David had raised, which, and I guess we've got, yeah, we'll get Paddy to perhaps comment on those. Welcome, Paddy.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I emailed David with some slight changes, or one change to one of the items that he brought up, and you felt very happy with those, David, those changes?
Yeah, no, that's good, Paddy. It's you know, it's I was just a bit concerned about, as you gather, but concerned about things that have been fencing in particular, and riparian plantings, which have been done between 2010 and 2020, just where it stood as far as in the council's eyes, as far as whether they would have to be removed or not. So no, I'm very pleased with the changes that have taken place under that 8.4.
Yeah, well, 8.4, that was already in there, that it's anything constructed after the date at which this bylaw becomes operative.
Yeah, no, I was just a little, yes, yeah, no, I was just a little confused with that. And the other one was the 7.1, just regards to pretty much machinery, but no, you've pointed that out, and no, I'm happy with that.
Yep, no, thank you.
Eric here, Nicole.
Go, Eric.
One of the key issues that we were confronted with was just principally baleage, but did note there were other, I think the term we used was positive buoyancy issues that occur. And so that's what the footnote principally covered. We did receive a submission from the eel fishers who didn't, as the plan initially situated, gave a confusing message about whether they could put nets in the water, and that's why that provision is there.
Can I please clarify, for the purposes of the record with David and Paddy, whether the changes you're talking about occurred offline or are already reflected in the agenda paper?
There was a couple of bits in yellow that Paddy highlighted. Now perhaps Paddy can tell us whether they are additions or whether he was just highlighting the pertinent pieces. So there was the words on 7.1, that is likely, was that is there before? So I'm not sure if that was an addition or just a highlight. And
Paddy, you're on mute.
That would help. Sorry, guys. Yeah, the that is that I've recommended goes into 7.1. I'll read that out. Every owner or occupier on whose land there is, or through which there flows a body of water, shall keep the body of water in the adjoining land for a distance of 7.5 metres from the body of water, free from all vegetation. And I've inserted that is likely to obstruct the free flow of water in the body of water, or to impede access for machinery to the water body to construct or maintain flood control works. In what we have a lot of issues when we're particularly doing drainage is gorse and broom growing up along the edges of the streams that the landowners aren't keeping control of, and we have to try and remove them so we can see, the machinery operators can actually see what they're doing. So we've got that's in there, but we've just put that is likely because it was a bit too broad before.
So that is an amendment.
Yeah. Quite a mind one. Does anybody got any concerns with it? Not seeing anybody. The second one was a little bit larger. Would you like to read that one out too? That was the 8.4 to Paddy.
Yes, that was actually just highlighting that we've Councillor Stevens was concerned about riparian works that was had already been put in the floodways or in the waterways, and anything like that we've usually worked in with the laws section to look at recommended guidelines on that. And he was concerned that historic stuff might be able to be pulled out, but it was just highlighting that we've got the council or any officer or agent of the council may remove or alter any works or anything constructed after the date at which this bylaw becomes operative. So that sort of definitely states not historic stuff at this stage.
And so that's not an amendment, that's just a clarification.
That's just a clarification.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any comments on that one? So that was clearly constructed after, which was just clarifying it. They both seem to be reasonably minor amendments of clarification.
If there's no further
comments,
I'm happy to move that the report be adopted.
Councillor Esler and Councillor Beard are both wanting to speak.
Okay, cool.
Okay, well, I'll take that motion, but I will now call on Lloyd to speak.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to know where we got to with the gravel one. Was that to be removed or left in?
I that we remove and gravel from the end of that list.
We are.
Okay.
There was an issue with regard to gravel and stockpiling for extraction, and that as long as that was temporary, as my recalling of the discussion was, as long as that was temporary, that was accepted. But long-term stockpiling could have impacts, and that was why it was included at the time. So it probably needs a wee bit of clarification about that.
Yeah, and I think that's my point, Mr. Chairman, is that at the way it reads at the moment, it's open for a large amount of interpretation, and that was why I wanted to raise and clarify it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I have a suggested amendment. So if we're deleting gravel from footnote 1, we put in clause F, so with the exclusion for fishing nets placed temporarily within a watercourse, we add after that and temporary gravel stockpiles. So, yeah.
That would appear to deal with the issue. Is everybody happy with that?
My question really was about the river can move quite a lot of gravel onto a farmer's paddock in the floodplain area. And as long as that's not going to give confusion as to whether that was gravel put there by the farmer or gravel put there by the river, or the gravel put there by a contractor.
I think.
Chair, I suggest we'd need to maybe just put a wee definition there somewhere so everyone's quite clear on what this is, what it is and isn't, and what does temporary mean. You know, so we don't end up with a problem down the track in terms of implementation. So, you know, some sort of simple definition that I'm sure between Gavin and Patty they can come up with. This is gravel that's been stored for a period of such and such to enable, and doesn't include any gravel deposited by floods, something along those lines, without trying to do it now.
I think the word extraction was in there somewhere, gravel for extraction. Maybe we could reinsert that if it's not there.
Certainly, if it's flood gravel, it's a bit different, and and most farmers are going to take it away anyway because it's not going to be very handy in a big heap.
I feel, Mr. Chairman, that we should have a time limit on temporary. You know,
Right.
there could be a big argument on that one.
Yes, because somebody might say 12 months. So you're right, but I'm conscious that some of those contractors are operating within that floodplain, and they probably do need some flexibility to be able to crush it or whatever and move. So as long as but I think that's wise to actually come up with a definition of what temporary is. Yeah.
Do you have a suggestion for what that might be, so we can get a feel from council as to whether or not what we believe is temporary is consistent with the council's opinion?
Can I just suggest that we sort that out offline, because remember, gravel operators and all those people are all consented. There's a whole framework around that. So we just need to be conscious of the detail to which we're litigating some of these aspects. So we can advise council on that in the context of actual how operations are undertaken and people are under their consents operating to remove gravel.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the provisions of the air plan take effect if it's more than 20,000 cube, so of storage. So yeah, so if it's less than that, it's generally an unconsented. Well, sorry, it would often require consent from the district councils if it exceeded their permitted activity criteria. But it wouldn't be consented from us if it was less than 20,000 cube. So.
Just Nicole, just for your information, I think Lloyd Esler still wanted to say something.
Okay, Lloyd Esler, you're on. Are you there, Lloyd? You might have to unmute yourself. No, we've got the wrong Lloyd, I think. Yeah. Is Lloyd Esler there?
No, he's talking, but you can't hear him, Mr. Chairman. He's got no sound.
Lloyd Esler, if you can hear me, can you push the mute? You're muted. Probably at the top of your screen, you need to push the thing so we can hear you.
He's not muted. He just has no sound.
Oh, he has no sound. Okay, so that is an issue. What he could do perhaps is to get on his cell phone and just come in on voice.
He could write his question in the chat if he's able.
Are you hearing that, Lloyd? It's unfortunately, there are a few technical. We're learning as we go on some of
I'll
this
try
stuff.
and ring him, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, no, you do that. That'll be good. Right, you're just going back to the comments about consents. What we're talking about here, I guess, is permitted activities, and I'm assuming from what Jono said before that if you've got a gravel extraction company who have a consented activity, that they may have specific provisions within their consent. Can you comment on that, Jono?
Yes, all I'm trying to say is that the concept around what we're dealing with is relatively, as Gavin pointed out, relatively small amounts of gravel stored for temporary periods. We can provide you with an envelope that works. We don't need to define that specifically today. Any major, piling up of gravel in the floodplain and that was all done through a consenting process. So both either territorial authorities or through us. So and remember, this bylaw is about protecting the stop banks and distance from the stop banks, and then some particular matters which accumulate in the floodplain, namely the baleage and those other things. So I don't think it prevents people removing gravel if it comes from a flood event, and I think we can address the concept of temporary storing pretty easily by Gavin and the team providing just some wording around that rather than us litigating it here today.
No, thanks for that. Any further comments from anybody? I know we have Lloyd McCallum trying to talk to Lloyd Essler to sort out his technical difficulty because he obviously wanted to make a comment.
Chair, if gravel extraction is fully covered in a consenting process, it might be easier just to delete it from what we've got in the floodplain. Because if anybody's taking gravel and they don't have a consent, then they shouldn't be doing it anyway. So maybe we'd just be easier just to delete that.
We may still need it because I think there's a permitted activity in the Southland District Council's rule to take a certain amount of gravel from land without a consent. So we're possibly better to stay where we are just to make sure we're covered on that one, Eric. But
okay.
Have we got Lloyd Essler back at all?
I can hear you. I'm on the phone, Mr. Chairman.
I can hear you, so you're on, Lloyd.
But I can't see anybody though. No, I just had a question about the stop banking, whether because if you've got 7.5 meters or something from the edge of the river, can you have the stop bank included in that, and then maybe some of the 7.5 meters outside? Is there a standard distance from the stream for the stop bank to go?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the 7.5 meters is the protection from the stop bank. We like to have that distance from the landward side of the stop bank and the river side of the stop bank to protect its foundations. Some areas the river is closer than that, but also some areas is a lot further away. But we're actually looking at protecting the foundations and the stop bank itself by having that distance through both sides.
Are you happy with that, Lloyd? Are you there, Lloyd Essler? We can see the phone icon, but I can't hear you. Now we seem to have lost him again. Well, I think that makes sense, actually. Certainly we need to protect the integrity of our stock banks. And is everybody comfortable with that 7.5? Neville, are you indicate? Oh, well, you go first, then I'll take Neville. We have a staff member looking a bit confused. You're on. Go.
I wasn't sure who you was referring to.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
I would just like to make the suggestion at this point that there's enough changes being discussed that it might be prudent to bring this back to council at a future meeting.
I think we probably do need to see the final draft, and we could possibly do it in principle, but I think you're right. I think there's enough changes there that it's doing it online is probably a bit risky. Yes, I'm happy with that. Rob, would you like to comment?
Yes, I agree. I think let's sort of take on your feedback, and then we'll incorporate and bring back to you for final approval.
Now, that's good, and I think Neville, you were indicating you wanted to speak before.
No, I wasn't actually, Chairman. I was just indicating I was in favour of the 7.5 metre separation.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to know we're learning how all this stuff works and what means what. So thanks for that. So we did have a mover, but we probably at this stage, Rob, your the suggestion is that we don't actually move it and second at this stage. We actually wait for an updated report.
Well, I'm just getting a sense that there's quite a bit of discussion still going on, and it's really difficult to do it, remotely. So I think there's a number of changes. We need to make sure everyone's on the same page and define what we're talking about. So I guess I'm looking to Alex in terms of being the drafter or the final, the holding the pen. That's your view, Alex?
Agreed, yes. I would suggest that we'll go away and make some changes to this thing as soon as possible and perhaps pre-circulate it to councillors.
I think that'd be good.
So that we're ready to agree to it next time we come back, and we'll arrange for the notification dates and so forth to change to reflect whenever your next meeting is.
So
Mr. Chairman,
have a motion to have this item to lie on the table.
I would suggest your motion could be defer consideration of this item to a future meeting of council to allow staff to report back with further changes based on the discussion today.
Yeah, sounds good.
That sounds moved by Lloyd McCallum, seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. No, no, thank you for that. I think it's better to take a little bit of time and get this thing right. We're facing the challenges of working remotely and electronically, but I think that was a good decision.
Mr. Chairman, just before we end on that, could I just
Peter?
say there's quite if I could say, there's quite a new dynamic around the 7.5 metres. I'm seeing a lot of activity on stop banks within that area. So that needs to be clearly defined and communicated to people. So it's opened up a whole new sort of area there with storing stuff within that 7.5 metres. I'm seeing bailage up stop banks, for example.
So you're suggesting we need a robust publicity campaign once we finalise this?
Well, yeah, around the protection of those banks, because they've become quite a high priority.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the 7.5 metres is a protection, like we don't want pump stations built on top of our stop banks. We do not want pipelines put through them. It's just if the stop bank itself is damaged, not so much the storage of items, as long as the stop bank itself is not damaged.
Okay, thanks, Patty.
Thanks, Patty. Okay, we did move and all that. So we can now move to item 3, which is change to the schedule of committee meetings. This is page 74 of the agenda. And I'll ask if staff to lead us into this one.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll take you through this one. So look, just a wee bit of a background to this. We were heading into COVID-19, and it was clear in terms of the restrictions on travel that having a normal operation wasn't going to work. We decided to have an emergency committee meeting, and also then the option of delegating all decision making to me. But then legislation was passed which enabled the council to operate remotely via Zoom, which is what we're doing. As part of all that, we also looked at suggesting that actually all of the decisions that are made, apart from anything that are delegated to OPAC, come to the council, and our strategy policy committee, our regional services committee, be deferred in the interim, and we carry on with the council and with OPAC, noting that there's need for significant discussions around finance and risk that we need to make sure are important, and that so that work needs to be done to help support the council's ultimate decision-making ability. So what we're saying is let's keep it as streamlined as we can. we will be looking at, our proposal is that we just defer those so the three committees are strategy, policy, regional services and regulatory. We defer them until the council is able to resume normal operations. So I think we could do a slight amendment to to make that clearer in the recommendations. And then, once we are back to normal or some sort of normal, and we can resume to meet in person, then those other committees can then resume unless the council decided otherwise. So, and also noting that, we have talked in the past about let's have a look at our committees and how the council works, noting that we'll also be doing that work at some stage and bringing you some, for discussion, some ideas along those lines, noting that the decision ultimately to change anything permanently lies with you. You are the decision makers. So Chair, is that clear then? We are looking at, it's just for the interim. We will change. I'm suggesting, I'm not sure whether Jan's got those refined wording, but essentially defer scheduled meetings of the strategy, policy, regional services and regulatory committees until the council is able to resume normal operations.
I think that wording sounds a bit clearer, but I'll ask for comment if Jan may be able to put up the wording before we vote on it. So that was recommendation 2, but any comments at this stage?
Eric here, Nicol, your point of clarification. So if an urgent matter was to arise that was pertinent to those committees, is that a delegated responsibility now to OPAC, or does the meeting reconvene, or what happens? We're living in very unusual times, and I wouldn't like us to hamstring ourselves if there was something that needed to be dealt with that's within the purview of one of those committees.
So at this stage, the suggestion is it comes to the council, and yeah.
Okay, just a point of clarification.
But also noting, I guess the other thing just to note is that there will be some matters that we want to brief you on that are relevant, that would normally go to those committees. So we're looking at having regular briefing sessions, workshop sessions, where we bring those matters that don't require a decision. They can come to you via a briefing.
And I'm assuming if there was a significant matter that would have gone to one of those committees, that there would be communication with the chair before it came up, just so that they are aware and can have.
Yes, that's right. That's my expectation.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Rob, would normal activities for the council be at level 2 and back to level 1 as opposed to level 3 in lockdown?
Look, so level 3 is still significant restrictions on meeting, and probably on movement. But I guess we'll have to see, because I'm sure what's required under those levels will be refined. And so I would, someone might have the speaker on at the moment, but I'd be suggesting that that's why I'm saying we don't have the recommendation relating to levels, but we have it related to when council can resume its normal operations. And that'll be defined. That'll sit under, well, let's see what the requirements are.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thanks for that, Rob. I guess there's just could be a little bit of concern because as we see moving forward, things may be fast paced and we want to be able to react to that and the council wants to be part of those discussions from the outset.
Yeah, and look, thank you, through your chair, that's why I think it's really important we have regular briefings on issues that are arising. So that everyone is in the loop and informed on these, on anything coming over our desks. That's going to be important for have implications for the council. We do live in extraordinary times at the moment, so we are looking at how do we streamline our decision-making process.
And I guess we can at any council meeting have another resolution if the need arises to change from that. But that is reasonably open-ended and flexible, I think, what's been suggested. So I'm reasonably comfortable. Any further?
Neville Cook. Neville Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Between committee meetings, I've tended to have some interaction with the managers of consents and just compliance rather, but they're involved also in emergency management, or the manager of compliance has. What sort of relationship should we be having with those managers going forward until we get back to normal business? I don't want to bother them if they're totally snowed under, but I suspect that they may not be able to fulfil completely their functions working remotely either.
So through your chair, good question, and I guess I'm encouraging my GMs with those relevant responsibilities to be checking in with the committee chairs, just to make sure there's nothing that we're missing, that's coming to them. So I'd be expecting Vin Smith, for example, to be talking to you, Neville, and then there might be a follow-up conversation with one of the managers. But essentially, I'm keen for the GMs to be stepping into space of that direct contact, and then there might be further down the track if it's needed.
Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask for clarification, if you as chairman are going to be notified by the CEO on some issues regarding with reference to any of those committees, I presume you could quite easily pass on those messages to the councillors.
Yeah, I think definitely, and if there's something significant and it pertains to a various chairmanship, they should also be in the loop. And so it's just we're going to have to learn how to do some of the stuff a bit more remotely and electronically. But I think a good point. It's trying to keep everybody in the loop is going to be the important thing with less meetings. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Chair, could I ask Jan if she's got the words that I spoke before, just to make sure everyone's clear what change the recommendation, what their wording ends up as. Jan, have you got that?
Yep, the resolution would read that Council 1, note the report, 2, defer scheduled meetings of the Strategy and Policy Committee, Regional Services Committee and Regulatory Committee until such time as Council returns to its normal mode of operation. 3, note the retention of the OPAC meeting is currently scheduled, but that its meeting cycle may change. 4, confirm Council will continue to meet on a 6-weekly meeting cycle. 5, note that as the country transitions out of the pandemic response, priority will be given to reviewing the committee structure of Council, including reviewing the interim operating style and the advantages and disadvantages of adopting this interim approach with a view to having a revised approach for the 2021 calendar year.
Everybody clear on that? Any comments or concerns about any of those recommendations?
And Chair, can I also note that if there is to be any change, that would need to be driven for, you would need to drive that. We might put up some ideas, but actually ultimate decision making rests with you, obviously.
Yes, no, that's good. That would be a governance decision. That's excellent. Any further comments on any of those recommendations?
Lyndall here, Chair.
Go, Lyndall.
Conversation right back to the beginning, but as the 6-week cycle for council meetings going to be sufficient if we are going to be agile for any rapid changes, seeing as there'll be no committee meetings in between?
So, Chair, can I ask through your chair? Yeah, look, if we need to have a special meeting, we can have a special meeting. So there's nothing stopping us to saying, hey, something crops up, we need a decision. We could call a special meeting. We called a meeting of that around the emergency prior to the lockdown. We called that very quickly. So we've got the ability to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Lyndall makes a very good point in that in the past we used to meet once every 4 weeks. Now we meet once every 6 weeks. And if there's less activity of being on site, then there's no reason why we couldn't bring these ordinary meetings of council closer together to a 4-week period rather than a 6, as a suggestion.
Eric, Chair, I was going to suggest that we have a caucus in 3 weeks in the intervening part, so that we're just kept in touch with what's actually happening. And maybe it's just half an hour or an hour, but something that we could just do and keep us all singing off the same song sheet, because, you know, there are issues that we have to respond to our constituents and various things at various times. Just a suggestion.
And I don't think we sort of have loosely talked about possibly having an informal Zoom meeting even once a week, just to appraise us. It could be a workshop, it could, but it's that you're right, just keep us up to date. And then, as Rob says, if there's something that needs urgent attention, we can call an extraordinary meeting, as we did to give us the powers to have a caucus of 2, which was superseded the following day when we went to level 4. But we have got some options there. Rob, you might like to comment on that too.
We are looking at scheduling at least weekly sessions that may be a mix of workshops and briefings. So that, we start tomorrow. We've got an OPAC workshop, but also we've got some further workshop scheduling for not next week because it's Easter weekend. It's a short one, but the week after. So from then on, we've got at least a weekly session plan where we'll be talking to all of you via Zoom and we could, as part of it, easily have a caucus session. So I think it's provided for. Yeah.
I wonder, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add to that, because my concern is with accountability and transparency, and caucus sessions and workshops are not open to the public. So if we're only going to meet once every 6 weeks publicly, like we are now, I don't feel that that's sufficient, particularly as this is a high pressure time.
It's a point, Robert, but I guess the workload in producing the agendas on a monthly thing, if it's not necessary, I guess we've got to sort of balance it a wee bit. Great to have the transparency, and it's great that we're actually zooming out there today. We're live streaming. So I guess this is a learning process. But we've sort of got to do the practical things, I guess. But Rob, you might also like to comment on that.
And thanks, Chair. I think if this lockdown lasts beyond 4 weeks, then we may need to review this. I guess we're just putting up here's some prison arrangements that we can look at in the interim. So we may we will need to review this if this goes beyond the 4 weeks. So that's what I'd be suggesting.
Any other questions or comments on this item? I'm not seeing anybody. Lloyd, are you seeing anybody? I'm not.
No, everybody's happy, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, would somebody like to move and second those recommendations?
I'll move that.
And I've got Bonnie's hand up there, so moved by Lloyd, seconded by Bonnie. Any further discussion? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Again. No, very good. We will now move on to, where are we going? Up. Extraordinary urgent business. We don't have any that I know of. So I guess actually the next thing is to move into public excluded. So this will end the live streaming portion of the meeting today. And while boys dealing with that, I'll ask somebody to a motion to move into public excluded.
I can move that, Mr. Chairman.
You're going to be moving into public excluded to deal with confirmation of minutes of the council meeting of the 26th of February, adoption of the OPAC minutes on the 19th of March, the adoption of the committee resolutions of the Chief Executive's Review Subcommittee on the 24th of March. And the grounds are to allow council to carry out commercial activities, including commercial and industrial, without prejudice or disadvantage, and to protect the privacy of natural persons. Section 72H and Section 72A of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act.
Thanks for that, Jan. I have a mover in Ellen. Now, did I get a seconder for that? David, all in favour say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Against, no. Carried.